WNST to the Baltimore Ravens hat. I think this was for, being green and thinking green and eating green. And instead, it's going to be gang green as the Eagles go out to Minnesota. We'll be broadcasting from the Mall of America out there and monitoring all things basketball back here. And, of course, Minnesota came in last week. Now we're in the Big Ten. Everybody's in the Big Ten, including this guy, longtime athletic director right here of the mighty Loyola Greyhounds. He was a Milford Miller back in the 50s and now in semi-retirement in Cape May, New Jersey, but not really because he's calling Rutgers basketball on the radio, which leads him to Maryland on February 17th. But in the meantime, we will welcome Joe Boylan back to his familiar stomping grounds. I think you and I were having a sandwich in Pikesville and bumped into each other, and next thing you know, we're talking basketball here at WNST. Joe, welcome home, man. How you doing?
No, it's great. Great, Nestor. It's always good to see you, and it's always good to be home. It's always good to talk basketball.
Well, I know, and this is really your love. Reset this for everybody who knows Joe Boylan and says, wonder what the hell happened to Joe. I knew he was gone. And you're doing Rutgers basketball, but you moved up to New Jersey. And how long on this Rutgers beat for you? Because it really does sort of make you really relevant to the Maryland situation in that you've seen Michigan and Iowa and Ohio State and Michigan State and Purdue like we have the last 4 weeks, right?
Yeah, you're right. I've been doing it for 3 years, so it's been a lot of fun. I retired in 2010, and after 20 wonderful years at Loyola with great people, I was very, very fortunate. Got to meet you during that stretch too, and it was a great 20 years for me. And so we live right by the Jersey Shore, so it's been good. So doing Rutgers has been really good for me to get around and see people and keep in contact with my basketball friends.
Well, in the Big Ten, everything's different there, right? I mean, it's the Maryland people are finding that out. Obviously, we're finding that out. And I think the basketball program had a pretty good little go, especially 2 years ago when they really had an opportunity to maybe go in and get to a Final Four, steal a national championship. Doesn't feel that way right now, and certainly you get around the Big Ten, and this has been a lot of fun for you to go to Mackey and see a game to start the year and go out to Michigan State and see the green out there, and Rutgers gave them a nice go. And that's an improving basketball program you're seeing every night, right?
Yeah, it's much better. Steve Pikiell's a head coach, and he's really done a terrific job here, and he's building the programs step by step, not trying to do anything crazy, and bringing in good players, and they've got a recruit actually from Bel Air, from John Carroll High School, Montez, who's a very, very good player, is going to come in and I'm sure start as a freshman. So, it's been fun watching that. It's also been fun watching the Big Ten. Maryland says, you got to feel for them. You lose Jackson. I mean, that's a huge, huge loss. And it just changes your whole dynamic. And you have a couple more injuries. And yet, having said that, they could have beaten Michigan. Michigan made an unbelievable play a couple weeks ago. And so, they're right there. If they can stay in the middle and have a little run at the end, who knows what happens.
It's funny you would say a John Carroll kid would decide to run off to New Jersey and play in Rutgers for the Big Ten and whatnot. Look, I mean, you're older than me. You're a generation before me, but my generation would have been Muggsy running off to play at Wake Forest, or Russ and those kids running down to play at Georgetown, or Sam Cassell running down to play at Florida State, because it was the ACC and because you could come home and play for mom once a year or whatever. I would think that maybe it would say something if kids from Maryland started really getting recruited more to Ohio State or Penn State or Rutgers. Heck, Maryland on the basketball and certainly on the football side trying to keep them home and recruiting differently. And, you were at Loyola a long time there, and, generationally things change and programs change and how recruiting changes and all that. But to see a John Carroll kid stay Big Ten but go up to New Jersey and play, that's probably the beginning of what you would expect the next generation to look like, right?
Yeah, I think so. And you look at St. Joe's, which is really a good program in Baltimore, and one of our former players, Damian Jennifer, is the assistant coach there. And they've had some players go to Villanova and other places, Cincinnati. So I think you're seeing that. And it's different too, Nestor, because every game's on television now. I mean,
sure.
It's incredible, the exposure. And people travel, and kids travel with AAU. I mean, they're in Vegas. I was there a couple summers ago with my grandson, who's a pretty good player, and they're like, 900 teams, 10,000 players, and those kids travel all over the country. So, the
and it's eye-opening even for you, right? Having been in the industry, how much has changed even in 10 years, right? I mean, everybody tells me that I wouldn't recognize it,
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And the other thing is, I think it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of years. The NCAA understands they've got an issue. I mean, they definitely have an issue with basketball. How are they going to fix it? It'll be interesting to see.
Well, the FBI's into that too. All right. I mean,
I think the one and done is going to be done, and now what the NCAA is going to do to piggyback on that will be interesting. But Maryland's the basketball side of it. Mark's done a good job there. He really has, and nobody can withstand those kind of injuries. And the Big Ten is a good league. It really is a good league. There's no question about it. It's different than the ACC, and I don't think you can ever replace those kind of memories. It's going to take a couple generations for that to happen, if it ever happens.
Well, Joe, I mean, the ACC is not the ACC anymore, right? So, I mean, one of the reasons is because Maryland's not a part of it, quite frankly. So, I mean, I'm not trying to put the genie back into the bottle, but I have embraced this Big Ten thing, and I know you and I talked about it privately. We've talked about it publicly, and, I've only got one stance on this. I don't think change for change's sake is necessarily bad. Certainly, for more money, it's good. But I don't know that the football program's ever going to, you got to crawl, and there have been so many of these, the Penn State basketball program, Rutgers, quite frankly, on both sides of the porch, right?
Yep.
And a lot of these schools that, even a traditional like Indiana, and I know you watched, part of that Maryland game, and they had a chance to win out there, and, you hit a free throw, you get the win. You box out, you play defense, you get the win. You guard an inbounds pass out at Michigan, you win. But they're this close, but sometimes it feels like they're that far, right? And, I don't know where the middle of it is, but when you're injured like this, you can't compete. And for schools that can do it on both sides of the fence, and, Michigan State showing maybe a little bit of that right now. Ohio State's had a better basketball run this year. But it's really, really hard to have that two-pronged program. Nobody talks about the Alabama basketball team, do they?
No. I think the one thing you realize after 3 years of traveling in the Big Ten is facilities. Now, Maryland's done a great job with the Cole Fieldhouse renovation. I mean, they're now on a par or above, actually, a lot of the facilities in the Big Ten. But it's all about visual for kids today. They walk in and they want to see something. I was with Tom. I'll tell you a quick story. 2 years ago, I was with Tom Izzo when we played it out there. And I said, Tom, what's going on outside here? He says, Davon Green gave us some money and Gilbert gave us some money. You should see what they did. They just transformed this whole entrance hall into their arena. It's a massive project, and it's all about the history and tradition of Michigan State. But this is the kind of thing that Maryland and Rutgers and schools like that just got in are fighting. It's incredible. And plus the fact, in a lot of these schools, there's no pro teams.
You've been doing this forever. What's been your favorite place in the Big Ten? Luke and I, 2 years ago, were out at the Combine and in Indianapolis, and I had a chance to go see a Butler game. I did not see it during the Super Bowl. Same thing. I still have not been there, but that's not on my bucket list or whatever. Right. Mackey was not necessarily on my bucket list, but it was who Maryland was playing that week. Maryland was playing at Purdue. Well, we had a car. We drove it out there and through the wheat fields, and there you show up in West Lafayette, and there's Mackey, and you're like, oh my God, what an unbelievable travelogue into time where that stadium sits next to that little circle dome, and you walk in there and you sort of feel the presence of John Wooden,
Oh, yeah, no question about it. I mean, Wooden took his team and opened that arena in the late 60s. So, John Wooden Drive, and I think when you go to Indiana, you think about Bobby Knight and Michigan State. What Izzo's done, I think, is an incredible job. I mean, all the arenas. I like Michigan State just because the fans are really close and they're there no matter what the time of the year. But all of those arenas are terrific. And Cole Fieldhouse, not Cole. God, it's a little that I'm dropping back, but Maryland's got a great home court too. But again, the thing people forget is if you don't have any pro teams, and a lot of those schools don't have them, it's all about them, and it makes a big difference.
Oh, my God, you drive out to Purdue, you're in the middle of nowhere, and the fans are insane. I mean, and they yell hate at Indiana in the middle of every game. Indiana, you suck, and it's sort of like Maryland, but they're a little nicer than that because they're Midwestern, don't you know? But as you get into this thing here, Purdue and Michigan State have really separated themselves, and more than that, Joe, I think from the Big Ten, once the big board gets set in March, Big Ten's going to have its feelings hurt in a couple of weeks, huh?
Could be, yeah. There's no question about it. And the thing about it, just to get back to Big Ten, you've got Ohio State. I mean, their facilities are enormous. And a friend of mine's AD at Minnesota now. They just are opening a $16 million like a student athlete facility for that they do everything in. And so it's amazing the amount of money that's put into these programs on the peripheries. Now it helps all the sports, but basically, football and basketball, as you alluded to, are the main ones.
But basketball's not about facility, right? I mean, literally. I mean, football's about what the locker room and the hot tubs look like. I get that from a football perspective. It's bigger and better and all that. But basketball's, that's how Gonzaga and Butler, and let's be honest, in your era, Georgetown went from, and Duke too, went from, the acorn to the oak, right?
Well, the other thing is, I think you can make a good case at Villanova.
Villanova's
got a really nice practice facility. I was up there watching Jay practice, and they're redoing their arena, but it's only 6,000. But it's a nice place, but it's not crazy. So you can get it done in basketball but you need a couple of things. You need a practice facility and a couple other things, but you don't need the crazy stuff that goes on in football. Football is a different world, that's for sure.
Joe Boylan is our guest, longtime AD at Loyola, and of course a Milford Miller. He is up there in hiding in witness protection up in Cape May, New Jersey, and running around with Rutgers, and they're playing basketball. Maryland's playing basketball. Some thoughts about these teams, because Maryland right now, as banged up as you hope that they would ever be at any point here, and trying to hide Bruno Fernando early in the game, then he gets banged up. Now at the worst possible time, and of course we're leaving for Minnesota in the Super Bowl. On Sunday, they'll get Michigan State. Then they go out to Purdue the middle of next week. This is not what you want to see at a point where you've already lost, a 5-year last 7 or whatever. It's been here 4 of the last 6.
Yeah, it's hard because, all those teams are good. I mean, nobody thought Ohio State would be very good. All of a sudden, Ohio State's, one of the best teams in the league. I mean, I think Purdue and Michigan State, clearly talent-wise, are the two best. So Maryland, who going into the season, I would think, no question about it, will be in the top 4 or 5 in that league. You just can't lose the caliber of players they do and expect to compete. But they have competed, and you can make a case for the last couple of games, except for one. I mean, they were right there and probably could have won a couple of them. Now the question is, can they get through this stretch and maybe steal a game and then make a little run at the tournament and then see what happens?
Cowan is, logging 41 minutes a game, and they're only playing 40 every night. I don't know how long you can ride that horse, and, I don't know that it's not to his detriment at this point. I mean, certainly the last couple of games, a little more sloppy, a little more frustration, a little less composure, and certainly at the end of the games when these games have been tight, to your point. I mean, Michigan, very winnable game. It's a bucket. It's defending an inbound pass. Indiana, it was about any of the above. It was about hitting a free throw. Could have been about anything, and they wind up losing both of those games. He is really shouldering a lot, as is Herter to some degree in hitting shots, and I know Nickens hit a shot and Wiley the other night as well.
Yep.
But the bottom line is Cowan has become Melo Trimble to some degree, or where Melo was 3 years ago. And, with no bigs and Tchaikovsky running around for 25 minutes a game and doing nothing, and this Tomajic kid who probably, Mark wouldn't even want him on the floor, they're going to play. They're going to have to play. They're going to play against Michigan State, Purdue. They're going to play all these minutes because they really don't have anything else.
Well, I think that, with the Wiley hitting some of those shots later or a while back, that helps. Maybe that jump starts him. But the one thing about it, Nestor, people forget about, when these games are on television, it depends upon the level of television, but all the timeouts are at least a minute and a half, and some of them are 2 minutes. So it's not like it used to be where you say, okay, he's playing 32 or 33 minutes. Still, it's tough, but you do get a lot more rest. just because of that. You know, it's not quite as demanding. It's still demanding. I'm not diminishing that, because after a while, you know, it's a long season and it wears you down, and maybe that's why the free throw is missed or something like that, or a turnover takes place. But he gives you the best chance to win, and it's not fair to the rest of the players either. They want to play with a player like that because they know they're going to get the ball and good things are going to happen. So I think some of that stuff really diminishes the number of minutes. I don't think there's any question about it. But it's still hard because he's being pressured every second he's on the floor.
Joe, for the Big Ten tournament moving to New York this year, some thoughts about that, moving it up a week, the pros and the cons. Obviously, you know, the money, the New York, that they flip themselves in order to accommodate New York, and, of course, the long-standing Big East tournament that had been, been playing up there as long as we can remember, quite frankly. But good or bad as you see it?
Well, I think when Maryland and Rutgers came into the league, I think that was part of the agreement, that we will bring the tournament there. And I think they were kind of hopeful they didn't have to do this kind of scheduling, but they did. They sat down with the coaches and they talked about it, and all the coaches agreed. So, you know, in some of these, it's hard sometimes because like we played Michigan, and at that time that we played them, it was their 5th game in 12 days. So that happens. But this one year, and next year you go to a totally different schedule. You got 20 games, and it'll be spread out a little bit. It's in New York. I think it's good for the Big Ten. They've got a satellite office there already, so it spreads out the Big Ten. And you talked about, you know, it's a Big Ten network, and you know how many people you can get to watch it, and now, when you're getting $51 million each school, Maryland and Rutgers haven't gotten that yet, but they will pretty soon. I mean, that's a lot of money, and the more you can expose, the better off you are. So that's all part of it. And I think, to be honest with you, for the people from the Midwest, I think New York will be a really good experience. You know, it's there's a lot to see there. I mean, everyone should see the World Trade Center.
Well, it's also new. I mean, you know, going to Chicago and Indianapolis or Minneapolis, whatever, you know, where they've held it, you know, everybody's been to Chicago if you're from Michigan State, right?
Sure. I think New York, I think from talking to the people in D.C. last year, people from different schools, they loved it. They thought it was great. A lot of them just took a whole week off. You know,
yeah, they want to move it to Miami, you know, except Miami's not in the Big Ten.
There you go. That would be a bad idea. So
like spring training.
But it's going to go back to the Midwest after this. So they've done their, you know, they've said, okay, Maryland, Rutgers, you're here. We did this for you. Now we'll move back.
Now you get on a plane and come out here in the middle of what's still winter in March.
Right. Well, that's where you're going, the Super Bowl out there.
Yeah. I'm packing my parka and going up there to see Belichick and Brady. You root against them, right? I mean, you'll be an Eagles fan in this case here, Joe?
Well, yeah, I'm actually a Ravens fan. I was very fortunate when I was at Rutgers. I got to know Steve Bisciotti a little bit and John Harbaugh, and I just think that organization is as good as any place in pro football.
But we're not in a tournament right now, but they got a bunch of ex-Ravens.
Yes, I would say, you know? I'm not an Eagle fan because I don't want to be associated with them, but I would like to see the Eagles win. Yes, I would like to see that. I really would.
I'm going to use that all next week. I'm not an Eagles fan, but I do want the Eagles to win. Can I steal that? Can I borrow that?
You sure can.
I'm not an Eagles fan, but I do want the Eagles to win. That's what I'm going to tell Jim Schwartz and Corey Graham and Joe Douglas and all those guys. There's a lot of Raven guys up there. That's why I'm wearing my green Ravens hat, which is my sort of wink and nod to my friends eating the cheesesteaks up there. Hey, man, we'll see you somewhere down the road here. I know let's see, the 17th is the Rutgers game here, right? So you will be on the floor at what you call Cole, but the rest of us call Xfinity.
Very good, Nestor. It's always good to be old school in somewhere. Gary Williams would appreciate that.
Oh, he absolutely will. Joe, always a pleasure to visit with you. Take care of yourself.
Okay, take care, Nestor. Good luck.
He is in a gym somewhere near you in the Big Ten. He is Joe Boylan, longtime AD at Loyola, now up in Cape May, New Jersey, calling games for It's Our Time in Rutgers. And, the Rutgers schedule looks just like the Maryland schedule. All the games look tough. Nebraska, Penn State, Illinois coming up for them. They already saw Michigan State, and Purdue. So the tough part of their schedule over. But they did beat Wisconsin. They beat Iowa last week. So Good on the Scarlet Knights. You can find me out in the Buy a Toyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day when I'm not in Minneapolis. When I am in Minneapolis, we'll be there on Monday broadcasting our 25th Super Bowl. I got a huge announcement I'm making next Friday. I'm going to start plugging that and telling everybody that it's just a big announcement about my career in WNST and our future here together beginning next Friday from Minnesota. We're also releasing Purple Rain 2 each and every day, a chapter a day, giving you something to read. If you're Joe Boylan and you love Steve Bisciotti and the Ravens, go read Purple Rain 2, the 5th anniversary of our march, of our Super Bowl championship, of our fun week in New Orleans. Makes me want to do it again, but not in Minneapolis where it's cold. Any Super Bowl is a good Super Bowl. I mean, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Annapolis, whatever it is. Purple Rain 2 is in the morning newspaper every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com, where it's still $10 a month. No commitment at all, and they're always judgment-free over there. Go see them, planetfitness.com and planetoftriumphs.com to get some inspiration. Last but never least, breaking news happens first on the WNST Tech Service. That is all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST, and our tech service waiting to bring you that Manny Machado trade that's never going to happen. Nasty at WNST.net finds me for complaints, criticism, praise. I appreciate the praise. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as our YouTube, WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.